Thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Swager?
Here.
Mrs. Davis? Here. Mr. Benton?
Here.
Mrs. Boer?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
Notice of the meeting.
This is a public meeting of the Board of Education for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. Upon request of the superintendent, the district shall make reasonable accommodation for a person with a disability to be able to participate in this activity. A recording is made of each meeting of the board as an administrative aid and shall be preserved as public documents of the board.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Swager, I have one addition. We have an executive session scheduled, and those 2 reasons already posted. One generally is for personnel appointment. The second one is reviewing the negotiations. But I wanted to add a third topic to executive session, and that would be consideration of the purchase of property for public purposes or sale or other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, unfit for use property at competitive bidding if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair competitive or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest. Sorry, that's very wordy, but that's the official part of it. So I'd like to add that as a third topic to executive session if the board agrees.
And with that addition to the agenda, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the agenda? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes. Public remarks. Jesse, did you have any public? There you are. I've looked right past you twice. Signing in. Okay, I just want to make sure you didn't have anything publicly you'd like to. Okay. Then moving on with presentations.
Sure. The first presentation, I'd like to bring up Mr. Barnhart. He's going to review our Model UN program, and he has some students here to showcase some of his work. Mr. Busberg, can we take that down right now until the presentation is ready?
Good evening.
This past December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we took 12 Johnstown students, 2 delegations, the Ohio Model UN Columbus, one representing South Sudan, the other representing Iraq. And there were about 1,200 students there from all over Ohio. It's something to see. It's one of the only, it's the only Model UN in the country where the students run practically everything. There's very little adult supervision or control, I should say. The students really run the show, and I think they really care about it. And do a lot of debate, public speaking, a lot of leadership things. And although the director of it said, Mr. John Lester says that it is an experience, it's not really a competition, and that is true. Although we did win some individual honors. Ethan Fogg won second, one runner-up in the citizenship contest. And Brandon Weisenberger won a outstanding leadership. So, and for that, just wanted to thank the board for financing this. Most schools have to pay, most of the students there have to pay their own way. They're kind of amazed that we don't. And there are a lot of schools where Ohio Model UN is a class. Our students had to carve out time of their own to do after school, evenings, things like this. We didn't have a class will love it. So, I always enjoy watching them, and what better way to let you let them tell you how they did it first. Yeah. This is Ely Stater. She's a junior. Next, we have Megan Miller. She's a senior. We have Gracie Snows and senior, junior. And the last we have senior just side.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much. The senior is my first time ever doing it. Man, I wish I did it every year by school. It was great. We got to make 170 resolutions over the course of 3 days, and I learned so much in that 3 days. It was just truly amazing. And of course, thanks to Mr. Walker and Plus for helping us there. Thank you guys for making it.
She also was this kind of extra, supervisor, and always nice to have someone to help you. And thank you once again.
Thank you. I actually had a question, if you don't mind. How do we pick the students?
Well, we haven't had to reject anybody yet. We had 12 people that signed up, and well, actually we had 12, and then one kind of dropped out. And we were able to grab a replacement. But so far, we haven't had an overabundance of people who want to go. That may be something we need to explore in the future. We want to put a cap on this or not. But I would like to take as many as we could, because I don't think we get, like they said, I don't think there's an experience like this. And there certainly wasn't anything like that when I was in school. And that's something I would really like to have done, I think. So we'll have to explore that if we get more, but we haven't had. Each year it's been about the same 12 kids. Last year we took over 11. So.
Excellent. Every year, I've yet to hear a student come back and not have a good time and not really enjoy it. So I guess the challenge to everyone, the students that went this year, is to recruit more kids for next year, so we actually get to a point where we have to make some decisions. But thank you very much for attending. It is really a nice thing to see. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Barnhart, as well.
Good.
Anything? Yep.
No, I think that it's exciting. I do appreciate Mr. Barnhart for all of his leadership in this as well. So he has a lot of passion, as you can see. Next, we want to turn to student athletes, and we want Mr. Brickner to come up and provide a presentation. Robbie, will you check that mic and make sure it's on? Okay, thank you.
Just now. All right. Well, thank you guys. Guess I need to talk where the microphone's at. Thank you guys for having me here. As you know, as athletic director, I get the opportunity to be on the sideline, root across. I get to root on our Johnnies across all of our sport programs, 7 through 12. We have many fantastic student athletes every year in Johnstown here that excel in the classroom, in competition, and in the community. Then there are just some that stand out above the rest, and that's what we're here for tonight. We'd like to recognize a Johnstown senior that has accomplished so much wearing a Johnstown Johnny uniform, Reese Savage. Reese's athletic career has been an absolute pleasure to follow. She made it to the OHSA state cross country meet not once, not twice, not 3 times, but all 4 years. She currently has a 3.7 cumulative GPA. Upon graduation, she will have earned a total of 8 varsity letters between cross country and track. And the cherry on top, she'll be headed to Ohio University to continue her athletic and academic pursuits. To Dr. Wagner and the Board of Education, thank you for providing this opportunity for us to celebrate and publicly acknowledge such a dedicated, hardworking student athlete. At this time, to hear a little bit more about Reese's career, I'd like to invite cross-country head coach Kevin Hickman to share what it's been like to coach her the last 4 years.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to thank the board and the administration for formally recognizing Reese Savage. I've had the privilege of coaching Reese for nearly 6 years through track and cross country at Johnstown. Reese has been, as Mr. Brickner said, a 4-time state qualifier in the Division II state cross country meet, finishing as high as 7th place. She owns 1 district champion title, 1 regional champion title in cross country. She's a 4-time LCL champion and runner of the year. She holds the JHS cross country record with a personal best time in the 5K at 18 minutes and 28 seconds. Reese is a model citizen and student at Johnstown. Through her actions, she embodies what it really means to be a Johnny, and how to represent our community in a positive way. I routinely have officials and coaches from other schools ask me how she's doing, offering comments of how great of a person she is, an athlete, and complimenting the fact that she prioritizes cheering on her teammates. These conversations are usually followed with comments like, wow, she's finally a senior. How long has she been around? With a sigh of relief, coupled with a hint of sadness, because that's the kind of impact she's made on our league and the teams that we compete against. Example of how she's represented our school comes from her 8th grade year. Reese went undefeated except for 1 race. The course that she did not win was made of 2 loops. She was about to lap some competitors, and volunteers didn't realize that she was completing the race, and sent her and another runner on a 3rd lap. By the time she realized and turned around, the other runner had already won the race. As an 8th grader, Reese's handling of that situation, which was much calmer and more mature than many of us have observed when others, when we've much more mature than situations that we've seen when mistakes are made by officiating in athletics. She and the other athlete talked, they congratulated each other, and they moved on before I even gathered what happened from meet management. Often, Reese was on a different training plan than her teammates. Despite this, she was always there to support them, cheer them on, and run with them, run extra with them to push them to become better. Reese has a massive list of accomplishments that barely tell her story. She may make a 5K look easy, but with that ease comes the hard work she puts in behind the scenes. To give you an idea of how driven she is, her sophomore year, she qualified for and ran the state meet with a stress fracture in her foot. When I reflect on Reese as an athlete and as a person, I think of passion, dedication, determination, perseverance, kindness, coachability, so many other amazing things. Reese, it's been an absolute honor to coach you. I wish you the best of luck as you continue at OU. It's my pleasure to introduce Reese Savage.
I just want to say I love representing Johnstown Athletics, and thank you so much for supporting me and recognizing me tonight. And I look forward to one more season with this program.
So what Reese is receiving here is LCL Cardinal Girls Runner of the Year. That was the plaque that was just handed. And then here's a commemorative recognition from the Dr. Wagner and the Board of Education, this certificate here.
Congratulations, Reese. I'd like to just say, all those accomplishments are fantastic, but what I heard from your coach and from others there, the more impressive thing is what a student athlete you are, meaning the spirit of being a great academic, but also being a nice person, a good person. And that's what was more impressive out of all that than all of your accomplishments on the track or on the cross country course. Is just that you genuinely are a good person, and that's what embodies a Johnny to me. So I appreciate it and thank you very much.
And Reese, I'm going to miss seeing you run up and down the road because I'd be driving up here to the school to take Amanda somewhere, and you'd be out there in the rain or in the bad weather, and she'd be running. So dedication. I saw a lot of dedication in your athleticism. So congratulations.
Yep. Thank you again. Back to you, Dr. Wagner.
I just got a text message from our high school principal. Maybe we could let some people leave if they have high school exams to study for. Yeah. So that, although it's entertaining to stay here, I want to congratulate Reese as well, but I know she has
Yes.
exams.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Bye-bye.
Next, we want to focus on recent compensation agreement and what's called an economic development incentives agreement. We'll get that up, posted in a second here. While we're waiting for that to come online, the board recently approved the compensation agreement and also the economic development incentives agreement, and the city did as well too. So we thought we'd do a quick run through and just talk about where we are, and then at the end, I thought Mr. Swager and Mrs. Boer might want to put in their next steps and expound a bit on what we started on about a week ago tonight. So I'll just track through these really quick. So there are two agreements, and they're often melded together, but they're separate. So there's a compensation agreement and there's an economic development incentives agreement. The compensation agreement really should live in eternity, but can be amended if needed. But that provides our overall guidance for economic development projects. The compensation agreement that we have structured with the city of Johnstown is largely modeled off of the compensation agreement we have with the city of New Albany. And that has a tiered system to it. In essence, though, ours is a little different because we don't have some commitments to the city of Columbus like New Albany does. So in this case, what happens is when you look at how it all threads through the model, the city would get 72.5% of the monies from a revenue sharing, and the school district would get 27.5%. And I know you've seen the models and just keeping this at a high level. Separate from the compensation agreement, we also have what's called an economic development incentives agreement, and that's a separate agreement that applies to this mixed-use development that's recently improved by zoning for the city and then the council. The project is envisioned to occupy more than 400 annexed acres within the city of Johnstown. Now that agreement is specific to that project. It can be amended or added onto through an addendum, and it can be restarted if we have other projects as well too. So any questions or anything I missed on the overall highlights of those two?
Any questions from?
Okay, you can go to the next
Understand? Well, I was just going to make a comment.
Sure.
For the residents out there to understand. So cities can, without our permission or input, can provide a 10-year 75% tax abatement. They're allowed to do that by state law. What these economic development agreements and working with the city to do is it allows the city to be competitive, give a larger, typically 100%, but the schools get reimbursed through the income tax of the employment that they drive. So when they hire employees there, the city collects the income tax. They share that revenue with the schools to reimburse us for the waiving of the property taxes. So that's what we have in the New Albany agreement. That's what we're having here in the Johnstown agreement. So I just want everyone to understand. So if you do read like tax abatements, you see that as often. People assume we do recoup, and currently in our tripartite agreement, I think all of our agreements, we're collecting somewhere between 70 and 100% of the taxes that we would have if there was no abatement at all. So we've been very successful with this model. So that's how these economic development agreements, and it allows the city of Johnstown to be competitive when they go out because your neighboring communities are offering these 100% tax abatements as well. So to be competitive, bring workforce in, but also not harm the schools, this is how we get that accomplished. So I do thank the city of Johnstown, Mayor Bernard, and the council members for working with us to get this accomplished, because it's critical to the schools to make sure that we are funded for the growth that that inevitably comes with development, but also that the city can finance their own needs police, fire, water, sewer, and all that. So that's why these economic development agreements are critical to the success of both the city of Johnstown and the Johnstown-Monroe School Board. So I did want to just clarify for everyone what exactly occurs in these agreements. And we've been successful to this point. We're just going to keep trying to move that model forward.
Correct. And on the Economic Development Incentives Agreement, that model is such that there needs to be some commercial development first before any kind of residential occurs with that. So we'll see what happens.
Now that Tim has said it all, I'm just going to say thank you to the city and I know the board, on behalf of the board, we would surely appreciate the relationships we're building and the fact that we could get to this compensation agreement. It is our lifeblood, and we're just so pleased to have the city's relationship now with us as we go forward. So thank you to the city. Thank you, board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we start to look at objectives. A couple of things I wanted to run through as well too, because it's more than the agreements, but what do we realize in this and what's our planning? So part of this when we go through this is we want to manage the growth of the community, including the school district. And really we look at that as a model by managing the land usage. So that's something we sometimes talk about reverse engineering. Like if there's going to be a project in, what is that doing for us as commercial, residential, housing, and we'll put that into our model. Some of the things we're working on as we move forward in this is the board has been very active on this for some time, looking at strategically how we move forward. And we're talking about capping the school district to about 4,600 students. Short term, we're talking about adding a 6 classroom addition to the current high school. That would buy us a little bit of time in terms of growth. Long term, we're looking that eventually we'll need to build a new high school, a new elementary school. That'll take us to 6 total buildings in the school district. And then it would require a reconfiguration of school buildings and grade levels. We're not going to get into all those details tonight because there's different options that will be explored at that time. One of the questions we are always asked is, what's the timeline for these long-term facility needs? We don't know at this point, but I think we try to control our own future. We could be 10 years, 20 years. We'll look and see what happens with this, but I know the board's very focused on it. In the end, what this would achieve if we're successful is that we would have 6 total school buildings. We currently have 4. And again, 1 high school, 1 middle school. We would have 4 school buildings to cover elementary and intermediate. Again, there's some apportioning needs to occur and some work there, but we're not going to get in the details yet until we see how it all shakes out with that. And then we start talking about what's next in this. And that is really a focus on looking at townships. And we have 3 townships in the school district boundaries of the 52 square miles. And obviously the funding mechanisms are different with townships, but there are some models out there that we're starting to look at. Mr. Swager and Mrs. Burr, I don't know if you want to say anything about what we started last Monday even in this.
Yeah, so Ruth Ann and Felicia and Dr. Wagner and I attended the Monroe Township meeting, and we're beginning discussions with Monroe Township trustees on economic development agreements with them as well, because while we know we don't want to ever get beyond 4,600 students in one high school, because we've been adamant that we do not want to ever build a second high school and split this community. So the maximum number of students that we can get is that 4,600 up there. And that's 30, 40, 50 years down the road we're talking. We're not talking in the next 5, 10 years. We have to roll that out very slowly and methodically. The only way that occurs is relationships with our township trustees and our city council. We've completed the city council one. We all are on the same page here. Now we have to reach out to Monroe, Jersey, and Liberty. So we started with Monroe because they're the bulk of our school district. They have the most land that is still in the Johnstown-Monroe School District. So we're working with them to try to develop some economic development agreements with them. And again, what we're trying to do is methodically control growth as much as we can. We on the board, when it comes to the growth, we're not the decision makers. We're influencers, as Mr. Benton often tells me. All we get to do is influence the conversation. We don't get to make the final decision whether a building gets built, a housing development goes in. We're not the decision maker. We're influencers, and that's what we're doing is we're trying to work those partnerships. Monroe Township was very accommodating, and they're looking forward to working with us there. As soon as we get done and make an agreement with the Monroe Township trustees, we'll move on to the either Jersey or Liberty and try to get those agreements in place. That's the only way that this school district is going to be able to control the economic side and the growth side is if we work with the township trustees and the city to control where we're going and how fast things get built. Dr. Wagner's pointed out before, we know growth is coming. It just has to be slow, and we have to be able to be prepared and build buildings for it in time. We can't get a bunch of housing overnight. We can't throw up a bunch of multifamily to where all of a sudden we need a new high school in 3 years. We're not financially going to be there. Dollars for these developments that everyone knows, even the ones that we know are coming, we don't start collecting any taxes from them for years because they have to build, open, and start having employees before we get our portion of those taxes. So it's going to take a while. But this board has been very adamant that it is our goal to not build more than one high school and to control the growth, and all new growth pays for the growth that is required in this district. So we're really trying to work hard to make sure that our current residents of the school district don't have to pay any more taxes. I've often said you probably won't pay any less, but you shouldn't have to pay more because of the growth. That new income that's needed needs to be sufficient enough to not only build the buildings, but staff them. So when we talk a new high school, we're talking $50-60 million and a lot more teachers. It's a big number. It's going to take us years to build up the dollars to do that. So this is where it starts with these agreements. So when you hear us at the Monroe Township meetings or hear that we're working with them, that's what we're working on, is trying to get to that same agreement that we're able to accomplish with the city of Johnstown.
I'll only add one more thing, and that's there are 54 square miles in our school district. So there's a lot to think about and a lot of growing to look at. We certainly, I reiterate what he said, and I know the board would say that too, if each of them spoke. We only want one high school. Obviously, we'll have to build onto that, and we'll have to massage some other areas, but that is our goal. So you heard it tonight, and we'll keep parroting that as we go through the meetings with the township trustees. So that's it.
Anything else you'd like
No,
to
I
add?
think that's it. I mean, I know we've talked about this bit in public meetings before, but now that we have the agreements done, I thought it'd be good to kind of put a bow on this, and we'll now look to implement, especially that economic development incentives agreement. So that's all I have. You ready for the next presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Next presentation is an Intel sponsorship announcement. So I want to talk about that for a couple minutes. Before I start, I wanted to recognize the couples who are here from the Chamber of Commerce. They've really done a nice job starting this chamber, making sure the businesses have a welcoming environment here, good fitting. I mean, Tiffany's here as well too. So kinds of support.
Can we take 1 minute and compliment them on the hometown event that just happened that was
Very
dynamic,
nice. Sure.
beautiful, memorable?
Yes, thank you very much.
And then I wanted to, like I said, the Chamber's here obviously to help form those relationships, and we have been forming some good partnerships. So we have a monetary donation, which I'll bring up at the end, and later on in the agenda, there's the pledge that the board will be asked to accept. But we wanted to focus this monetary donation, and what we want to look at is we have a strong project lead the way model in our engineering pathway, but we want to enhance that more, and that's part of where we'll direct some of the support. Also, we want to look at our robotics program. If you're familiar with the robotics program, it's really been a middle school program, but there's not really much of a receiving system here or an opportunity to articulate to the high school. So what we're going to do now is look at in-school, out of school, and being able to look at this robotics program and make sure we truly have a middle school, high school model, and Intel will be helping us sponsor that. The question's been asked, we'll probably use the current middle school space because we can dual purpose it, so we won't need space at the high school, but we'll work on that and can keep the board updated. In addition to a monetary donation, Intel's been a good partner in this too, and what they're talking about is when we look at these two objectives, what we're going to accomplish with this donation is we're also going to look at what I call the human capital part of it. So when we were at the event last week, Mrs. Smith was able to, Ms. Smith from Intel was able to introduce me to engineers, many of whom were women. And we thought, well, we need to do more to showcase, some of our underrepresented populations. We try to get more of our female students in the sciences and certainly into professional development in fields like that. So that's something we'll look at there. So there'll be the human capital part of it. Also, that we're talking about holding a STEAM Day in January, and we're going to work on that with Intel. They're going to sponsor that for us. That'll be really a twofold aspect, and that will be to make sure that we're focusing on STEAM, but also workforce development too, about jobs that are available. You hear a lot about these technician positions that are available, and up to about 70% of the jobs that are could be technician based. So we're going to look at that, look at fields, and when Emily and Toby are talking, they're always interesting to underline it's for really the area, not just for Intel. So they're going to help with workforce for their business, but also the area, because we need to make sure we focus on all the businesses and they coexist. In addition to and I'll get to the financial sponsorship, but in addition to some of the other work, you've maybe heard of Khan Academy, and it's been a free service that's been available for some time. Well, there's a branch of that called Conmigo, and Intel is actually sponsoring Conmigo, which is an assistive program for students and teachers, and it does a mimicking program. It uses a little bit of AI, and we're going to be piloting that. And Intel has picked, I think, just 4 schools in Ohio to do that. So we're one of the 4. And we'll be focusing just on the middle school, but we're going to focus on science because that's our next area of curriculum and development focus. So we're going to include that with the Conmigo. So we'll see how that looks. In addition to that, they're going to help us with technology a bit, which is a good thing. We'd like to be able to see if we can have equipment so students can take some technology home. We currently don't have enough in the fleet to allow that. So Intel's looking to help us with that as well too, and there'll be a donation of some very good refurbished used items or maybe some new technology. So that's forthcoming. And having said all of that, the amount that Intel is going to donate to the schools, and again, you'll see a resolution later tonight to accept the pledges for $250,000. I left that to the end because I wanted to make sure it's not always just about the money. I mean, it's very important, but you can see all the other facets. And when I talk to Emily and Toby, they're always make sure to emphasize that Johnstown is their school district, and they want to make sure they can do everything they can for the community and for the school district. So we appreciate the partnership, and certainly the monetary part of it is important, but also the partnership and, like I said, the human capital and technology and even sponsoring the Khan Academy and Conmigo and letting us be one of the pilot districts for that. So.
Thank you.
Again, I'd like to echo that human capital portion of it is equal in my mind.
Yep.
That expertise and that knowledge coming in and giving the opportunity. While we always need money to promote it and do anything we do in the world, but that human capital for us is just as important. Really, to me, for the students at Johnstown, this is about opportunity. It's about opportunity to the future, be it with Intel or other companies. This will gear our student body to another avenue of lifetime work. So I do appreciate these.
So if there's nothing else, they wanted to keep it low key tonight. They're not speaking, so
I'm excited about the STEAM camp.
Yeah.
Later this year, and I know the students will be too, and encouraging about the workforce development. I talked to the students because in talking with several of the students here through my daughter's friends or just in general, I'm not sure they know what's available to them.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and it maybe that they didn't pay attention that day. I don't know.
Well, no,
we all know how that is sometimes.
It's an evolving
sometimes.
situation or developing.
Right.
Right now we're involved with the economic development
There's a lot
aspect
going
of
on.
things, but the nice thing is there's an eye to the future, and we're focusing on that. And again, we have good partnerships, so that's what we'll continue.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for all the really unique opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise because of Intel. So thank you.
And when we have the STEAM Day, the Workforce Development Day in January, we'll get that together. There's going to be some fun aspects, and it's going to be primarily for high school students in that case. We've done a little bit with the elementary and intermediate,
That's great.
obviously middle school, so this will be a high school focus, but I'm not supposed to talk about too much because we want to keep it in a surprise. And sometimes
Want it to be
January gets to be a little doldrums, especially after winter break. And
Is there an element for board members in there too, or is there an age limit?
I was going to say, you're going to have to give me the date so I can request a day off of work so I can
Well,
actually go.
I will tell you,
a
it,
little bit ahead of time. for
you're,
that.
you're kind of pushing me a little bit, but there'll be, yes, there'll be an opportunity for you to participate. It'll most likely be off campus, and there'll be an event for you to
No quiz.
participate. No quiz, but it'll be very much innovative, I believe. So you'll be able to see things and participate with the students again offsite. But I'll stop there because I'm saying too much already. So, but thank you again for the partnership, and thank you to the
Yes, thank you.
chamber for helping with all this. And that's all I have for presentations. Unless there's questions.
Any questions on any of the presentations? All right, we'll move on to board committees. Building and grounds, did you have anything to report? I think we've met since, yeah. Curriculum, anything that you'd like to report out on?
We'll have a curriculum meeting no, we do have curriculum meeting, right?
We
Yeah.
gave a kind of a little brief at our work session.
Yeah, we did.
Something we said.
They just know how long these meetings can
That's
go.
right.
No, I prepped them before. I said you don't have to stay for the whole meeting if you don't want to, because they have other appointments, so they squeezed in their time here.
All right, moving down then.
Do you want me to cover the curriculum real quick, or do you feel like we have?
She had the update at the last
Okay.
work session,
Okay.
unless,
Yeah.
and then policy, we've got
Yeah.
one coming up next week, do you?
Actually, we just had one.
Oh,
And we
okay.
have, so I'll give an update.
Yep.
So, policy committee met November 21st, and we also are meeting again next week. We looked at 11 policies from the regular Neola update, and all 11 are on the agenda for the first reading. And then as a part of our catch-up project, we are also looking through each of the 10 sections of the policy book to see which ones needed updated. And we've picked 16 policies from the bylaws section. And again, all 16 are on the agenda for the first reading tonight. One of these policies, if the policies from the bylaw section are approved, all of the policies in that section will be completely up to date, which is really exciting to have a whole section of our policy that's current. And then we'll shift our focus to the 1000 section of the policy book. And we're making a lot of really good progress. Derek's been really wonderful, and we've just been keeping the momentum going.
All right, excellent.
One other thing that I'll mention is one of the policies that we're going to be talking about later tonight is the tobacco use policy. And that title is a little bit misleading because it includes other items, right?
Yeah.
So, and I would add, and everybody here on the board knows that it includes other items, but I would suggest that the public maybe take a look at that policy, because it involves vaping and other methods. And as we read and we hear about things within our community and outside of our community, we find that vaping is something that's becoming more prevalent. And I would ask both the students and the parents and the staff, everyone really take a look at that and see if we can try to get it under control, because we don't want to become like everywhere else where vaping really becomes an issue. So it's a little misleading. It just says tobacco use, but it also includes other methods of presenting yourself with drugs.
Yes, no, I appreciate that update, and you're correct. Vaping, as you know, is prevalent everywhere, and we have to be more vigilant than ever on this topic. And regardless of how you voted on the last legalization of marijuana, it's going to become more prevalent and open and available. So it's going to be even more critical for us to stay on top of that for the minors that attend our school. So as parents, we'd ask that you be involved. The school is not the only place that this occurs. Quite honestly, it usually occurs outside of school hours. We're the last ones. If we're finding your child or your friend, your child's friend vaping, they've probably been doing it for a while outside of school, and they finally got caught in the school. So be aware of that and make sure you're trying to be vigilant as you can. I don't know what else to say other than we've got a lot of children vaping out there, and we shouldn't be. So keep on top of it as much as you can, if you would. Moving on, unless you had anything else on policy. Ruth Ann and I gave pretty much the economic development update there with the township where we were. So Unless you have anything else on board committees, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
It will probably have insurance coming up in January, just prepping the board. We just finished open enrollment. Mrs. Drummy's done a nice job with her team about getting that all organized, but we're going to review all that and see where things are. Plus, we'll have some good end of year data, so most likely get the insurance committee together there. And then at some point, for Mr. Benton and Mrs. Davis, we'll have to get technology together because we'll need to start thinking about the next school year, believe it or not. So probably January, February, and looking at our capital assets. And then you heard tonight too about possibly some additional devices that might come our way. So we'll convene that in the near future.
All right, moving on to the
Yep.
consent agenda.
Resolution 23-12-181 is consent agenda.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion,
I'm going to go through them real quick. Okay.
please.
So we have our math focus plan, and I know that was talked about curriculum, and then we reviewed it at the last work session. So that'll most likely be added onto, but at least we wanted to get some of that started tonight. Also, the technology seal, I believe the board has seen some information about that, but Mrs. King brought that to us as adding into our current offerings, so that'll give us another opportunity for students. We have monthly finance reports that Mrs. Drummy has prepared. We have board meeting minutes, so you can see those as detailed. Resignations, I'll go through those in just a second because I want to talk more about that. Classified employment, we have a new incoming staff member, Dave Seeland. Supplemental employment, we have for track, you can see. Pupil activity, we have softball. We have a tutor on here, and I know you've seen this in the past, but we continually add as a need occurs. So we have one more tutor to add to our list. Substitute food service, and we have volunteers. Questions? I'd like to get back to resignations. We have
questions. Go on.
3 people for resignation. One is about volleyball. We don't, it's just appreciate the service there. But one is to focus on Deb Perderi and 5th grade teacher at Johnstown. She's here, and I want to talk a little bit about her because we've only worked together for a year and a half. But you do have records that I could research, and I know people, so it's been good. I will add, you're always smiling, though, Chip. You know, that when I thought about that's something I would add, right? You always seem happy, always smiling. So that's engaging for students and for staff. So she was born and raised in Johnstown, which is significant. She's taught 23 years in the Johnstown schools, teaching 5th grade, all but 1 year where she taught 2nd and 3rd grade online during the pandemic. She has 3 children who are Johnstown alum, and then she has 1 grandson who is also Johnstown alum. So that's quite a career, I would say, to have 23 years and, you know, born here. And I'm sure it looks different all the time and more to come. So we certainly appreciate all of her service. The other person we recognize, he's not here tonight, is Chris Carlisle. He's been with the Johnstown-Monroe schools for 21 years. He actually even goes back to Adams Middle School. He was there for 3 years and 18 years at the high school. He's helped with high school ACT prep, pre college math. He also is involved with extracurriculars and supplementals and athletics. So he has boys basketball. He was coach there, track, girls basketball, golf. With boys golf, there's been some success there that I'm just hitting some highlights here, but league champ, 8 years, district champ 2 years, state qualifier, and 4 years as again state champs. So a lot of success there as well too. And I believe he was an assistant with basketball, so I wanted to recognize him as well too.
Thank you very much. Well, Deb, thank you. Quite simply, thank you. It's been a pleasure. One thing I'll say about Deb, even when we've disagreed, she's always been pleasant. Well, it's not always easy. I mean, you know, we've sat on the opposite side of negotiations several times, and when it's complete, Deb's a professional. She handles it. We go in there, we do our business, and she's pleasant afterwards. And I can always say she's always had the best interest of her students. Even, you know, during negotiations, everything she brought up is student driven. So after, you know, the contracts are signed and everything, she moves forward and everything moves. And that's a professional, you know, at what you do. So I do really appreciate that. While I certainly will miss seeing you at the school, as Dr. Wagner said, you're always smiling, and I do appreciate that. You're very warm and welcoming, and that's something that helps. It speaks volumes to what Johnstown is, and you are Johnstown. Clearly, from everything we've heard, everyone there. I think, did you say your husband was from Johnstown as well? All right, so you're Johnstown through and through, clearly. So I do thank you for the not just years of service, but the excellence through your years of service. So thank you very much.
Debbie, I was going to add, you make learning fun. And that means a lot to our students. I was really hoping that my last two were going to get you. And that's okay, because I look forward to you coming back as a really exciting substitute.
Yeah.
She's already committed to some of that, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I think
Well, we
that's
don't
good,
accept
right?
resignations unless you already
Yeah.
agree to be a
Yeah.
substitute.
I just said we're not accepting it. but-
Yeah, I'm really confused, Debbie, because I didn't think you got the memo. Like, the memo is that you're not allowed to retire. And, I'm confused. It's the first time I've dealt with you over all these years that I'm really confused. But you're really going to be missed, and we've talked many times, and you've had my children, and we've talked about the impact that you've had on student lives. And I can tell you as a parent of a student that she had an impact on, she's going to be sorely missed. And she knows what I'm talking about, and I really appreciate it. My family really appreciates it.
I want to thank you, Mrs. Perderi, as well for all of the service that you've given. Fifth grade is a difficult year. It's a huge transition year. I think every year is a transition year, but fifth grade seems to be a difficult year for kids. And I think you come into the classroom every day with a smile on your face. You're happy. And the kids relate to that. And I can't thank you enough. I also want to just say that my husband still doesn't understand how you got me to go camping in fifth grade with Amanda. Amanda begged me to go, and I did not. I'm not a camper, but I went and I had a great time, and I tried my best, but I'm not a camper, but it was nice. And I saw how you interact with the kids on a daily basis, and every day those kids came up to see how you were, what you were doing, what we were going to do that day. They were so excited, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for the children of Johnstown. Thank you.
If there's no other questions, that's a long list there from consent, but all important. So I think the board's ready to vote.
Call the roll.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
And again, thanks, Deb.
There are two recommendations on the treasurer's agenda. Resolution 23-12-182, accepting donations. I'm sorry, I don't see the list there. Let's see what they are.
I have
Thank you. There, yep, thank you. Roof Management donated funds for the scoreboard, $5,000. Dave and Ann Hendren donated cash for the Ann Bullard Memorial Scholarship Fund, $100.
If I can get a motion.
I'll motion.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Comments? Obviously, thank you very much to the roof management in memory of David Denman. David was instrumental in getting the scoreboard out to, led that group and led the fundraising. I believe Roof Management was one of his companies that he worked closely with. They made a donation, his company, and they made a donation originally, and this is an additional donation that we certainly appreciate. And then also want to thank Dave and Ann Hendren for the donation to the Amy Bullard Memorial Scholarship Fund. That one's greatly appreciated as well. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Benton.
Yes.
The second resolution, 23, oops, I'm sorry, hold just a moment. It didn't save for some reason. Okay, the second resolution, 23-12-183, is asking the board to authorize a transfer of $4,542.57. This would be authorizing the movement of money from the class of 2003 to the class of 2005, as requested by the class advisor and student officer.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Discussion? I think this is pretty routine. The one class passes it on.
It
The only
is.
question I had is does it keep growing? And at
Well,
what point? I've never
I
really
wouldn't-
followed.
The
Yeah,
amount of money?
yeah. I've never really followed that number. Is it getting bigger each
That's
year?
big.
Well,
I
it's
feel
one of
like
the
it
things-
is, but I
it's
don't
one
know
of the
that.
things that I discussed with Dr. Wagner earlier this year, and I can't remember which board meeting it was. But maybe it was September, I don't know, August or September.
Yeah, we have it on our to-do list.
Okay.
This
But
is,
the class dues, they pay each year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. But there is a large amount every year being transferred. And no year, the 2020 or 2021, when they couldn't have the events. Yeah, but that was an exception. But it has been around $4,000 to $5,000 we're transferring. It's a lot. It seems to me that possibly we don't, or we need to reconsider what we're doing for the class.
Mrs. Drummy and I will look at some of these, that we just need to get some other projects taken care of, but we're looking at this, we're looking at class fees, athletics, so there's a lot we're digging into right now, and we'll have, a work session at some point, we'll go through this and we can talk about, some of the trend and then what we want to model moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Back to you, Dr. Wagner.
Sure. Resolution 23-12-184 is early graduation, and we have 3 students listed there.
If I can get a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any comments?
As a reminder, these students have met the criteria for graduating at the semester, and then we'll invite them to come to the ceremony in May.
I'd just like to say congratulations.
Congratulations to them, and hopefully that we can get some, as the curriculum committee meets, we've been talking about some other things to try to gain interest for those ones that have fulfilled and maybe not think that they have a second semester of their senior year. So, okay.
Excellent. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-12-185, and that's an Intel sponsorship pledge.
If I can get a motion.
So moved.
I'll second. Oh, that's fine.
Take it, Ann.
Give it a all second.
So $250,000 as directed, like we said, to the engineering pathway and robotics program, and we'll have more to share there in the near future.
Are we, do we have a program at the high school? I remember speaking about it when we saw the robotics at the STEAM night that we had in the wintertime. In middle school, we had several that were graduating from 8th grade and moving over to the high school, and they were concerned about not having a robotics club. Do
Yeah,
we have?
No, this is what we want to do, is articulate this to the high school, because and Mrs. King brought this up, and Mr. Boothberg's talked about it as well too, but we want to make sure that once those kids finish 8th grade, they want to continue competing and growing, and that's where we talk about this workforce development too. So a lot of times you're exposing students to different concepts and experiences, and then we want to make sure we can help forge that into something meaningful, like workforce at some point.
I was very impressed by those robotics
Yeah.
that they had there, and I think everybody had an interest in it. I know the gentlemen were all standing around and watching it, but to think that the kids built those and then they competed was very interesting. So,
well, and
like
if
to see
you're
that get
the
started
high
at
school
high
ones get a little bit more intricate and sometimes aggressive. If you've seen some of them, so
I watched this robot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was trying to be delicate about it, but we'll see how it works out. But I think it's something exciting. It certainly fits in, like I said, with the engineering and some other things. And I just want to make sure we have a clear plan from middle school through high school for our students. So, and we're happy again for
support that.
Intel to really help sponsor this for us. And again, I'm going to underscores not just the financials, but it's the human capital. They've really committed to bringing in different members of their staff to help support us at many levels. So.
That's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Call the roll.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Swager.
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-186 is a memorandum of understanding with CTEC for a multi-skilled technician program.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
We talked about this bit in curriculum, and we're not, I know this is a public meeting, but we'll have more detail on this. What this is generally is that we're working with CTEC. They have an adult program right now that mirrors this, and they really don't have a high school program that looks at a multi-skilled like this. What this program would do is it would allow us to host via CTEC a program for juniors and seniors, and it would expose at least 4 areas: construction or carpentry, electrical, plumbing, and then some digital controls like your HVAC and all too. We might add another area to that or 2, but we're going to start with those 4. The board approves this. We'll continue with our process that allows CTEC to go ahead with their funding. There's no cost to the district on this other than we have to find space at the high school. We start working on that. It also lets us serve as a model on the western side of Licking County. So this would be a satellite program that's working as a separate location for CTEC and our partnership with them.
Well, I'm probably as excited about this as any program we've unveiled, because I do think this has a lot of potential to open up doorways to students to understand potential lifelong careers at a younger age. And really, if successful, I'd like to even start it sooner, maybe move it down to the freshmen and sophomores. So I think this has a lot of potential, and I look forward to it being instituted.
One thing, Dr. Reiner, can you clarify what type of a certificate they would get from CTEC, please?
Sure. So the first year, our high school students are just going to get our seniors will just get like an acknowledgement, if you will. But actually, they'll have the full CTE certification. They'll have their career tech when they're done. So this will be just the same as if you went to CTEC on site.
And one thing this does is it gives the students a small version or glimpse of each, like the construction, the HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. So then they can decide before they go on to the next level of apprenticeship for plumbing or for electrician or carpentry. And I'm not sure if HVAC has an apprenticeship as well, but if it does.
Yeah, that's why we call it digital controls, because it can go
Digital
different directions, but it's essentially it's going to get you in that
But one
realm
thing
of
we heard from
electronics.
so many students that they didn't know what they wanted to do. We see now
Yeah.
that many of them are going into these fields and they're needed. The trades are needed. So I think this is a great glimpse that we can offer here. And I'm so excited that CTEC is going to lead it here in this part of Johnstown, and our kids will get to experience that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how we're going to. Are we going to talk to the students in January, or how are you going to start recruiting for that?
The first step is, if the board approves this tonight, then we'll put it into the program of studies, and then we're going to have to recruit for this. The program can take, I believe we have to finish the physical location at the high school, but probably about 24-ish students, maybe even a few more. We're going to see if we have enough students, and that's 24 juniors and 24 seniors. So we'll see if we have enough students. Being on the western side of Licking County in the partnership, we can allow other schools to participate if we want as well too, to fill out the numbers. So we'll see where we end up with this.
I think it's great. And one of the other things that we heard this year from CTEC is they have the largest junior class in their history.
Mhm.
And that class will be, that filled every spot. It'll be the largest graduating class of Licking County. I think that says a lot of where things are going. And this is a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. When I talk with businesses, and we've just started now some of these discussions, this is an extremely engaging conversation with them, because what they say is exactly what you said, Mrs. Thomas, is let's expose them to different, and maybe I don't want to work in plumbing. Now I know that, or I have some marginal knowledge of that, but I'm not going to pursue it, but I do want to go into electrical or one of the other areas. The same thing, or similarly, they also tell us what they want to be able to focus, and this is more of a career tech thing, is looking at our students ready for workforce, those soft skills, those, you know, navigating a work environment, and they say that's equally important too. So they're thrilled when we talk to businesses. So I think this will be a real good jumping off point for us.
That's great.
I did want to mention more to our uh, residents out there, our parents. Opportunities like this aren't just handed to us. This is what Dr. Wagner goes out and does every day. This is why we have a superintendent that we think very highly of. These things people aren't knocking on our door just offering these things. What you're seeing tonight with Intel, what you've seen here with CTech, these are things that Dr. Wagner's out pushing for this district each and every day. He's a leader in the field, and we're becoming the leader in the entire Licking County as a result of that. So I do want to thank you, Dr. Wagner, for these types of things occurring. It's not happenstance. These aren't being just handed to us. These are things that you go out and make relationships and work towards, and this is when we reap the benefits. So I do want to make sure everyone understands how these partnerships come along. It's through hard work. It's not just through being there. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
And I would second that, Tony, what you just said. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Wagner. I appreciate that.
Well, I'll tell you, we have a great team, though. You know, and I mean, I get to work with a great group of people. They're taking care of things at the building level. I'm not sometimes always admired in that, and I get, you know, involved where I need to. But then it allows me, and then I appreciate the efforts of the board because, you know, I always believe it's coming. So you know, change is coming, and it's ours to manage. And we accept that responsibility, but we want to grow in the proper way. So I'm very excited about these opportunities for our students and what we can do for the district and the community.
And if we're good with that, we'll call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-187 is approval of bus routes for the 23-24 school year.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
This is coming to you tardy, but it's by design. I know I've told the board that typically you would see this in September. Obviously, we've had bus routes running since then. I do want to compliment Mr. Busenberg. He's really taken the lead of this in operations, and we have a separate service that we contract with, and he is the liaison for that and has done a nice job. I have more confidence. I have a lot of confidence in these bus routes now and what's been done. I think they more accurately reflect what we have as a service. And part of that, what's important is that we have good seating charts. We know what students are on the bus, who aren't on the bus, and it just really helps us overall. So again, a lot of this work's done by Mr. Busenberg and his team.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-188 is the second reading of revised policies.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
To clarify, since these are revised and the second reading, if the board approves these tonight, these will be authorized, and then we will start on the process of replacing those and getting them ready to implement.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-189 is the second reading of rescinded policies.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
These policies I know that you've seen as well too. So these are a lot of times we're rescinding because there's been updates and just a level set. So we'll rescind. Some we replace, some we don't. I would call your attention to the intra-district open enrollment. It's 5113-01. We don't need that policy, and so that one will be rescinded. You won't see that come back at a later time. Again, if the board approves this tonight, this will become final for this period of time.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-190 are the second reading of replacement policies, and these often reflect what you've previously seen, but not in all cases. Like if we're not replacing a policy, then it won't be listed there.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-191 is second reading of new policies.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second it.
Any questions about these?
You can see we're fairly active on the policies. It's been intense. Don't you think, Amanda?
I think it's been really good, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's,
I think it's a fix. You two are.
We're
we're together, right?
yeah, we work well.
And Derek is our leader, right?
Take us to your.
I know.
He's going to lead us off a cliff at some point, right?
Oh, come on. He's doing a nice job with this. I gave him this as a task. He's been doing a great job.
Can we call the roll?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
That completes our second reading. So now we'll get to first reading. So the first one is 23-12-192, and this is first reading of revised policies.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second it.
Any discussion on these? We've had them for a while and we've read through them, so I don't think there should have been any questions. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-193 is first reading of rescinded reading of rescinded policies.
Motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion.
Just again, another quick reminder, the rescinding is not that we will no longer have these policies. We sort of generally made a rule that once we are past one update in Neola, instead of having 2 or 3 updates and going back and fixing, and we're just going to get rid of them and start fresh. So just a reminder on that.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-194 is first reading of replacement policies.
Can I get a motion?
Motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-195 is first reading of new policies.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-196 is the setting and time and place for the 2024 organizational meeting of the Board of Education.
Can I get a motion?
No motion. I'll second it.
It's no
I'm
longer
tired.
policy, so someone
We're
else is
done.
going to make
Yeah,
the
No
we're
motion.
one
done.
policy. Yep, we transitioned. So this will be for our organizational meeting, and then what we have is the business or the regular meeting after that. We'll talk about this when we get closer to organizational meetings next month, but the second meeting in January, instead of a work session, I might ask the board to have a regular meeting on that too, so.
I did great. We did it.
It should be in the bottom here when it says January. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just to clarify, what we're talking about is they show the meeting when this occurs, so it's today's meeting, but then what we're asking for is the board to approve resolution for the organizational meeting to occur on January 8th, and then, as I said, the regular meeting will follow immediately after that.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes,
Mrs. Thomas.
I think that's opposite.
it is, but it's.
Oh, it's opposite. Okay.
I think
Let
I
me
was,
fix
I
that.
think I motioned first and
Okay.
it's all right. I say yes.
All right, thank you. I
We both
fixed it.
agree.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Resolution 23-12-197 is President pro tempore for the 2024 organizational meeting. Obviously, everyone's roles end the end of this month, so we have to get ready. So we appoint a temporary president of the board.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Call the roll.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton.
Yes.
Any board comments?
I have a comment. I want to know where the elf is. Where's the elf? You're not allowed to tell me. Okay.
All
You
right.
might want to comment what I'm asking you.
They pled the fifth on that. So.
I know, but why did I ask it? Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Dr. Wagner?
A couple things. Wanted to provide a quick update. Demolition of the board office still on track. You've already seen that the fire department's already started working on, and we expect the demolition to occur as on schedule, barring something that we don't expect or bad weather, which doesn't seem to be in the forecast. Dave Jennings done an awful nice job with this. I mean, he's really made this turnkey. He's got all the utilities taken care of, everything nub. He's talked to the city. We have the tap secured so we can recap if we need to. He's really led this and done a nice job. So, including his team getting everything out of that basement. It's all categorized in the office, disconnecting utilities. Like I said, it's been really good. So if there's no questions, that's moving forward. Next, I want to talk about residency. You know, this is an area that we've had to watch more and more. Goes back to what Mr. Swager said earlier about, you know, trying to control for growth and all too. Really, we need to make sure that people are here, bringing their students who are actual residents of the school district. And we have hired a residency officer right this year. The board's approved, and we have a couple cases we're pursuing. And in January, we'll be sending a message out to the entire parent and probably put up on our social media for the communities. And we'll have a tip line. So if you want to report that you have some concerns, I think it's time for us to start looking at some of the residency and make sure we have all the students who are supposed to be here. We obviously recognize one of our student athletes today. I wanted to highlight Abigail Adkins. We're not acknowledging her yet because she's still in season, but she has passed over 1,000 points now as a threshold, and that's very significant. So we
Did I see she's like only is it the third or fourth?
Yeah,
student?
yeah, it's that exceptional.
Yeah.
And what we thought is we were thinking about acknowledging her today, but we thought since it's in season we shouldn't, because we don't know if it'll be, I'll put pressure on 1,100, 12, you know, we're still sequence on all that. So, you know, we'll see.
And
But-
they play tomorrow at Lakewood, so if
Yeah.
you don't have anything to do, you can go watch her play tomorrow night.
Yeah. So more to come there. So you'll
I just
have
want, I
another-
would comment on that too. So I went to the game, and I would, you know, obviously Abigail, she, you know, reached a milestone, 1,000 points. That's an incredible career. She made it at the free throw line, so she got fouled for her 1,000th point. But I also wanted to point out, you know, our student body came out. They had signs. I mean, it was really nice to see the support that they showed for her as well. So I like to see that, you know, the entire, you know, a lot of our seniors, boys and girls, were in the crowd there that night supporting her. So we have an excellent girls program here, and Abigail leads that program. It's pretty clear on the court when you watch that game. She's a leader, and it's impressive to watch her play. So it's been a pleasure watching her, and I look forward to hopefully a deep run into the playoffs with her. So 15, 20 points a game. How many games you got left? 12, 1,300 points,
Yeah.
hopefully. We'll see.
Yeah. I went 1,000, 1,100 just to kind of keep
Yeah.
it conservative, but you know, we'll see what happens. But anyways, certainly we'll be able to celebrate her after season's over. But I want to just acknowledge that because that is exceptional. Was able to attend. I think we talked a little bit the I'll Be Home for Christmas event. That's really well done. Mr. McDonald did a nice job capturing that. That's up on our website. That showcases the community, but also our students in that. And it's great to see the enthusiasm of our businesses too. So, and a lot of that obviously done with the chamber. So that's well done. I want to acknowledge that. Local music concerts have been going on, and was able to attend one today. Mr. McDonald and I know there was one yesterday as well too. So it's exciting to see our students in another realm there too, celebrating the holiday. So
I'd like to add on that, I'll be home for Christmas, and just a general statement. I know with the growth that's coming and a lot of things that people are seeing, you know, a lot of people are Johnstown's losing that character. That's what everyone's afraid of. But I actually see the opposite occurring right now. It seems as though Johnstown is actually getting together closer because of the growth. Making it's solidifying a lot of what we're doing. Those downtown events they're putting on, it was fantastic. I've lived here, 25 years, and that's the nicest event we've had in the 25 years I've been here. So it's really nice. So I do think that the change, while it is coming, it doesn't have to be the negative. It actually can be turned into a positive, and I do see the community doing that in many ways, not just the I'll be home for Christmas, but a lot of other things I think the community is doing right now is actually bringing it together. So I do want to recognize that that's a positive of what we're seeing right now.
I would just add that that's not the first year of I'll be home for Christmas. It's been a lot of years maturing and a lot of volunteer hours that have tried to bring it to where we see today. So I want to acknowledge those people that believed in that idea years ago. We gave passports to businesses and incentives to go in the local businesses where you could get free items. So I'm really appreciative to what I've seen it grow, and I would agree with you, Tim. I think part of it is it's causing us all to rethink. We might not get to see our friend tomorrow, so they may have moved out. So, it's a great thing. So thank you again to the people and the effort that put I'll Be Home for Christmas together this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Christmas lights look fantastic downtown. I mean, that's really a nice touch to the
They
downtown.
They do.
I had to pinch myself. Do we live here?
Yeah.
Spur, that's a good point. I don't want to embellish. I think it's almost 60 years now.
Yes.
That it's
Yes.
a long time.
yeah.
So I'm always careful to respect those who came before us because we work off of that foundation. We don't always think about that sometimes. So I think that's important. Mrs. Thomas, Davis, Mr. Benton, we have to think about the organizational meeting that's coming up, and then we have a swearing-in ceremony since you're all reelected. So think about who you want to help with that. We can have some dignitaries. I have some ideas. I'll get in contact with all of you, but you can use different people, all the same. But we'll have a nice little swearing-in ceremony when we do the organizational meeting. So give that some thought. If you have, a pastor, or if you want somebody elected official. I've done judges before and other people. So give that some thought. Okay. Well, if you want somebody, sometimes it's good to partnership opportunities too to think about. So I'll get in touch with all of you about that. So just think about that. What is it?
The judge.
Oh, yeah. We were thinking
That's
about
a winner.
Yeah.
Maybe not. We're a loser.
it. Yeah. And last, I'll end with kind of a bittersweet thing. But I was glad that we could manage at the last business meeting we were able to manage put together quickly for the Mr. James Metz the graduation and really need to credit the team because Mr. McDonald did so much work with that. Went out to the house and collected some video, did a lot of back end work. Mr. Busenberg was on with Justin's our rep. We made sure to get him an authentic. Mr. Metz had an authentic diploma. Mrs. Lowe's working. A lot of people, like I said before, a great team. And unfortunately, after about 10 days after our ceremony, he passed away. So that's very sad. But I also feel like we were part of that, ending there for him. And I know how proud he was of that and his family. Some of us were able to make it to the calling hours, and his wife made sure to ask me to express to the school district, school board, and the administrators how much that meant to him in his last days. So of all the work we do, and it's all meaningful, I think sometimes it's important to recognize those things. So I want to end on that, like it's kind of bittersweet.
Yes, thank you very much. With that, can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Make the motion.
No, I'll add it's for the 3 items.
Yes, for the 3 listed items, the 2 and
That's
then the
resolution.
addition.
I don't second.
Resolution 23-12-198. And then we may ask the board to come out and vote after that based on the
Yes.
personnel matter.
There's likely action after the
Yep.
executive session. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes, executive session at 6:22. Gives me a countdown. I want to see the 5. All right, out of executive session at 8:39, and we'll move on with the severance payment.
The motion would be to authorize the severance payment for April Sheehan in the amount of $2,538.11.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Discussion. This falls in line with the current practice and past practice of this, and we've asked the treasurer to look into this and just compare it to other districts and make sure that everything's in line. So, any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swafford?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Call the roll.
Yeah, we're getting fast. Like we
We're
got
ready
it
to go
down,
home.
right? Just like policy. Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swafford?
Yes.
We've been here too long.